There's a further wrinkle to Aristotle's story about how we acquire the moral virtues, and it has to do with pleasure. So, what Aristotle notes is that we tend to take pleasure in the things that we become habituated to, or at the very least, we don't find them painful. So, for example, if you have a child who, children, some children at least, right? They take toys from other kids and they want to play with them. They don't want other kids. Okay, fine. Say the parents correct that child, right? Routinely correct that child and make the child, share the toy. You can't take it or whatever. At first, at least, the kid might be very upset by that, right? The kid takes the toy, little Johnny takes the toy, and he wants to play with it, but then his parent makes him give it back, and he starts crying. He throws a fit. That's very painful. He wanted to play with it, right? Um, Over time, however, what Aristotle is saying, if little Johnny is made to always give back and always share and so on, he's going to start finding it less painful to do that. He might even come to find it pleasant. He might even become a sharer, right? He'll want to share the toys because this is what you do. This is how you act, right? At the very least, he won't throw the same tantrums when the same thing happens. Oh, yeah, this is what happens. Okay, fine. Yeah, I can't take the toy. And oh, yeah, I've got to give it. I've got to share. Okay, fine. Right? We tend to take pleasure in the things that we're habituated to, or at the very least, we don't find them painful. Another, some kind of evidence for this. I mean, essentially, what Aristotle is saying is like we're kind of creatures of habit, and we do, and um, well, yeah. Let me add the kind of next piece of the puzzle. We tend to do the things we find pleasant, right? So we tend to take pleasure in the things we're habituated to. And just as a kind of matter of the psychology of human beings, of how they behave and act, for good or worse, we tend to do the things we find pleasant, right? Um, we're creatures of habit. Think about it like this to kind of see Aristotle's idea here. You probably, not everybody, and this doesn't happen all the time, but probably when you woke up today, or when you went to bed last night, and when you go to bed tonight, you're going to do things in the exact same order that you always do them. When you go to bed, you have some sort of routine. You go to your room, put on the pajamas or whatever, and then you go brush your teeth, and then I don't know what you do, right? But you probably do things in more or less the same order every night. That's just how human beings are geared. We tend to just do the things that we're habituated to. And if something kind of throws off your routine, you might be a little miffed. You might be, no, I need, if somebody, I mean, different people are different, right? But to kind of have to violate our habits, we find off-putting, perhaps even painful, depending on what the habit is, right? So we tend to take pleasure in the things we are habituated to, and for better or worse, we tend to do the things we find pleasant. Aristotle's not saying that's necessarily a good thing, right? If you find bad things pleasant, it's a bad thing. But that's just how human beings are geared. Human beings will do the things that they're habituated to. Human beings will do the things that they find pleasant. That's just how human beings work. And so what we find is that the moral virtues reinforce themselves. How does that work? Well, as we were talking about, how do you start acquiring the moral virtues? Well, you have to perform the action. So we'll again use justice as an example. You have to start performing just action. So when you're a little kid, your parents make you do the just thing, say, right? And so they make you perform these actions. Well, over time, if they keep at it, and you're made to perform these actions over and over, you develop a habit for doing them, right? You develop this habit for doing just actions. You become habituated to it. It's expected. It's just, yeah, that's what I'll do now. That's how I act. But now what Aristotle is saying is, well, look, the things that we develop a habit for, we tend to find pleasant. And so the more that we are forced or compelled by our parents to do the just thing, the less painful we're going to find it to do that, to do the just thing. The more pleasure we might come to find in doing it, right? The more habituated we come to it. That's how we act. And maybe you come to see, yeah, actually, I like sharing my toys with other kids, right? That's I'm doing what I'm supposed to do, and it makes them happy, and I like doing this. And this is right. Come to find pleasure in doing just actions. And coincidentally, this is all, I think Aristotle want to say, this is all equally applies to learning skills or arts, right? You take a kid to piano lessons or whatever, and they might not like it at first, and this is weird, and I don't know, I don't like this at all. But you get them doing it over and over and over, and eventually, hopefully, maybe they become a piano player. They come to, no, actually, I kind of like playing piano. This isn't so bad, right? That's kind of the idea, right? And so, but now it's applied to these moral virtues, to something like justice. You develop a habit for doing just actions. You come to find it not painful at the very least, right? You're not going to throw a tantrum when you have to share a toy, but you might actually find it pleasant. But look, we tend to do the things that we find pleasant, the things that we're habituated to. So we tend to perform. If you come to find pleasure in doing just actions because you're habituated to it, you're going to perform more just actions, which is then going to strengthen your habit for doing them, which is then going to make it less painful and more pleasant to act in that way, to do just actions, which means you're going to perform them more and and so on, right? The virtues are self-reinforcing. That's Aristotle's idea, right? Because habits are linked to pleasure, the virtues become self-reinforcing. But this is true not just of the virtues, it's also true of the vices. If you, from a young age, perform unjust actions, right? So take something like this. Let's say little Johnny is, little Johnny, his parents take him to a park. And there he is, I don't know, a park, whatever. He has toys. Take him to a play date. I don't know. And they're playing with toys. Little Johnny's playing with toys with the other kids, and he takes a toy from the kid. Okay, fine. That's an unjust thing to do. That's not to be too mean to little Johnny, but you shouldn't do that. And he then at that point, and this kind of thing happens more than you might think. He at that point looks over at his parents, right? His parents are sitting over on the other side of the room or whatever. And his parents look at him, and to little Johnny's parents, little Johnny can do no wrong. He is the apple of their eye. He is just the cutest thing in the world. And so when little Johnny looks over at them after taking the toy, they just look back at little Johnny. Oh, little Johnny. Oh, how cute he is. Oh, look at him just sitting there. Oh, little Johnny, right? And they just smile and laugh or whatever. That's the kind of thing that probably happens more than you might think, too much. Well, what does that do to little Johnny? He just got a kind of positive reinforcement. At the very least, he wasn't required to give the toy back, right? His parents just kind of smiled and laughed. Oh, cute little Johnny or whatever, right? He just performed an unjust action. And if anything, he got kind of, a positive reaction for doing that. And so he's going to probably do that again. He's not being corrected. He's going to perform unjust actions. Yeah. He's going to develop a habit, perhaps, for performing unjust actions like that. He's going to come to be habituated to acting that way. And he's going to come to find, it's kind of expected for him to act that way. He's going to expect to act that way. He'd be very pained if he were all of a sudden compelled not to act that way. Yeah. And so he's going to be on this self-reinforcing circle of vice. This is why Aristotle thinks it makes all the difference how we are raised from when we're very young, right? It makes all the difference how somebody is raised, because your habits, your character starts getting formed, from the minute you can kind of act in some sense. You know what you're doing, like, a 3-month-old isn't really acting. They don't really have intentions or whatever. And I don't really know what's going on in the mind of 3-year-old or a 3-month-old, but from the moment you can act, you start forming habits. And so it really, really, really matters how you're raised, because by the time you're an adult, 18, your character is already set. You've already been forming your habits for, 17, some or what, however long, right? 17 years. You're not going to all of a sudden break this self-reinforcing circle, right? Your character, according to Aristotle, by the time you're an adult, it's set in stone. Your character is what it is. And it's very, very unlikely that people substantially change their characters once they're adults. And so, how we are raised makes the biggest difference for whether or not we're able to live flourishing, happy lives, right? Whether we're able to live lives full of virtuous, rational activity.